I much prefer to think that it doesn't become law, doesn't become passed by the state and citizens of California. You don't face that.
Yeah, there is no question in my mind that if SCA 5 were approved by the voters of California, and then the UC system were to impose quotas, I would be first in line to file a lawsuit with everybody else. I'm against quotas. In fact, there's one point I want to raise. There, right now, even under the current version of this bill, which needs to be improved and is flawed, there is no word in here that states quota that's used by Senator Hernandez. It's only a description that Mr. Lair has used. There is no language in SCA 5 that says there's going to be a quota against Asians. Let me finish. There is no language in SCA 5 that says parity, so that if Asians are only 13% of the California population, then only UC admittees would be 13% of the total. There's nothing in there. And that's why we need to look at this in a rational way, look at the intent, work with State Senator Hernandez to make sure that it is what it is intended to do. Again, as what Professor Lynch stated, and I share his sentiment, I'm against quotas. I would hope that Senator Hernandez will actually reinsert, this is something that I'm not sure Mr. Lair has talked about. He says, well, I have read the language that was stricken out. There is intent language here that was amended out that needs to be brought back and perfected. So contrary to what he has asserted, there is the word recruitment in the intent language. And I think that that's why I urge all of you to look at the bill very carefully, what was originally in the bill, what was stricken, what it is now, and I think as it goes through the assembly, there needs to be a thoughtful discussion about how this bill needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Senator Buck,
I'm not an attorney, but it seems to me attorneys would find a way to litigate it. They always do, right? But I would say, regardless of whether it's got quota in there, let's go back to the simple fact, there's only so many slots available, whether it's 9% or 12.5%. If Asians have a disproportionately higher number than their population now, they're going to have a much lower number, whether it's through quota or recruitment or whatever you want to call it. As soon as you introduce race as a criteria that you can make a decision by, it's going to have an adverse reflect on somebody, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist, as was said before, to figure out.
Another question, very important to myself, and this had kind of been bothering me a lot, is SCA 5 eliminates public education from the protection under Proposition 209. Does not mention anything about contracting and employment. From an Asian American perspective, we have faced, as all of you probably know here, I see mostly middle-aged people sitting here, career bamboo ceilings, we call it glass ceilings in the American way, bamboo ceiling when it refers to Asians, in promotions, employment, and also in public contracting is basically an old boys network that our companies have not been able to break into. Would you comment on why do you think it's only schools that's excluded from this on SCA 5? Would it be helpful to include contracting and employment as well to amend the Constitution and therefore be having a level field for everybody? Let's see. We'll have Mr. Lair started twice. What, Professor Wang, please?
I'm not the author of the bill, and in fact, I did engage Senator Hernandez as Chief of Staff and his person in charge of education legislation that this past Tuesday when I went up to Sacramento to talk to them, to ask them why those were excluded, and didn't really give me a good answer other than that the reason why public education is included is so that you could the university can then do more extensive outreach and recruitment early on from the elementary school all the way up. So I really am very, very much at a loss about why the bill is fashioned in that way. Maybe Senator Harvard.
Yeah, I don't pretend to understand Senator Ed Hernandez's mind. But I would say he didn't include it because Prop 209 was passed by the people, and typically when you take on tough battles, you try to limit the scope of it. I don't think he nearly anticipated the adverse reaction in the Asian community to what he did take on, however. When it comes to public contracting, things like that, we do have a lot of federal laws that are involved in that, as well as state laws, and I think we've come a long way in equality for who gets things. I know when I was on a public project doing grade separations in Southern California, I found out we had to have a certain percentage of disadvantaged business enterprises, which are owned by minorities. You get certain points, if they were female, if they're Asian, if they had to represent the community that the jobs were being in. And so I know there are some very significant laws on the books that require us to be not just giving the good old boys that are, normally build the bar down the street, but, as far as why Ed didn't put that in there, I think he was just trying to be strategic and keep his focus narrow so that it wouldn't go beyond our admission policies through schools.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Durr, please respond next. Of course, always feel free if you have nothing to say when you go on to the next question.
Yeah, it sort of befuddles me about how the bill got amended. In fact, there is one provision in the new version that was adopted by the state Senate that, for example, it says, state does not include the University of California or the public school system. That to me is really strange because K-12 education is totally state funded, and we should always treat K-12 education as a state function. I am a little bit frustrated with this discussion because I really think at the end of the day, it comes down to money. And with all due respect to the senator, I disagree with this assessment about the UCs in terms of its had the largest rate of increase in its budget. Well, the reason why it may have had an increase in its budget due to some Prop 39 support, Proposition 30 support is that during the tough years, higher education was severely slashed. Your students today are paying much more tuition than when my children went through the UC system. And for many, and we should not pretend that every Chinese family is well-to-do and comes from a professional background. There are many low-income Asians who are struggling in trying to get into UCs. And with regards to Mr. Lair's point that, there's great diversity and there are a lot of Pell Grants. If you look at recent data of the UC admittees in the fall 2013 class, the proportion of low-income students went down. The proportion of students who are admitted coming from families who had no college graduates is going down. So these are very negative trends, and I think we should be mindful of what kind of diversity that we seek to achieve. It's well beyond race.
Please wrap up. Yeah. So fair to everybody else with time. Okay, Mr. Lair, you have.
I haven't looked at the data recently, but I think the UCs continue to be leading the entire country in the diversity of their student body vis-a-vis socioeconomic status. If it went down, it may have gone down to 0.5%, but 37% at UCLA, 30-something% at Berkeley, 30-something% at virtually every one of the other schools. It has been they have received accolades over the past year by the New York Times and other papers because they've simply done a stellar job of recruiting without diminishing the quality of their admits by recruiting poor kids. It's unprecedented any place else in the country. There isn't a public university, let alone a private university, that comes close to doing what the UCs are doing. And you keep talking about some other version of SCA 5. I mean, you know, it could have been the Declaration of Human Rights, but it isn't. SCA 5 is these days a travesty, and I don't know what other versions existed, but the version I have in front of me would be a disaster, and its pre-existing conditions are all dead on arrival. This is the one that we have to deal with, and I think you know, to talk about what existed before is just you know, not on point. Thank you very much.